have a Zoom audience as well. Hopefully, if they cannot hear, then, well, I'll check here in a minute. But I'm thrilled to welcome you guys to our first Operation Cura Personalis event of this year. This is we are entering our third year. This started really at the height of the pandemic in the fall of 2020, and is really an initiative that the program office and I started to really remind everyone, all of our community, of how important our wellness is, and really sort of that holistic wellness. And included in that is really how important our community is. So creating opportunities to connect and to engage and to focus a little bit on things outside of finance and business and all of these other things. With that, I'm thrilled. We've had a number of alums come in and speak well, this is actually our first in-person one. We've had a number of alums share their wisdom and share their gifts with us and really do some great seminars and workshops. But I don't think I can think of a single person in the world, really, much less an alum, that better represents what we are trying to do at McDonough and through Operation Cura Personalis than Leah Evert. Leah is a 2019 alum of the MBA program, so was sitting in your seats not long ago. She is a vet of the Army Reserves. She is a registered dietitian. She is an entrepreneur. She has started a nonprofit. She is a coach. She is a speaker. She is an author. And she is also a stage 4 cancer thriver. Leah, and while she was sitting in your seats, was diagnosed in her second year of your program.
First year.
It was your first year. Yeah, the first year of her MBA program with stage 4 cancer. Breast cancer, and was told that she would not live long enough to graduate from the program. She has, and she is going to share with all of us today really some of her, I wouldn't call them secrets, but some techniques, some things that I think will benefit all of you. So it's really a pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's really fun to be back. I haven't been back since the day of graduation because pandemic came and haven't been able to visit. So it's been really fun just to be here. I'll share a little bit about my story. In 2017, I was a first year, I was part of the MBA Flex program. At that time, it's called the evening program. Student here at McDonough. I was working at a corporate wellness consulting firm. I'd spent the last decade of my career as a dietitian and then a health consultant. So I was working with organizations to help transform their healthcare strategy to have their people be healthier, cost less money, and create a more engaged workforce. So I was working with about 30 different companies, small companies, large companies on those strategies. Happily enrolled here, and I was also a nutritionist in the United States Army Reserve. I think I was in my 7th or 8th year at that point. And during that time, I spent that classic 1 week in a month and then 2 weeks a year providing healthcare services to either soldiers or low-income members of the United States, where we would go out and provide various services. So living what I felt was a very busy and fulfilled life. I'm here in Washington, D.C. And I had that kind of classic thing that, anyone in your life that's had breast cancer, where they feel a lump and they're like, this has to be nothing. I'm a young person, I'm an active person. I had been a college athlete, I was a nutritionist. I felt like I had kind of done all the right things in my life, and I had just been to my doctor 3 months before, where I had a thorough exam, everything felt good. And then went to the doctor and said, I have this lump, it must be a cyst. And went to the radiologist, and she said, well, it's not a cyst, and I'm very worried. And I remember that moment, of course, ingrained into my brain. From there, went on through a battery of tests, and to be perfectly honest, breast cancer is a very curable illness, and so I had this unrealistic expectation that I was going to go through chemotherapy and wear my pink t-shirt and then walk in the parade with everyone else and get through it after about a year's time. After about 3 weeks of testing, we found that my liver had been riddled with cancer. So in 3 months, I had gone from no cancer to an entire liver full of cancer. And then I also had nodules in my lymph nodes and in my lungs. And my doctor at the time, right here, gave me about 2 years to live. So she said, you know, this is what you're going to die from. You kind of need to accept that. Yes, there are treatment options. Yes, there are clinical trials. But like, this is dire. So I want you to just take this seriously. So the 10-year survivability rate for the type of cancer that I have is about 4%. The 5-year survivability is about 22%. It's getting better, but at that time I was given very little chance. And the interesting thing about that moment is I was most disappointed that I didn't think I'd finish my MBA, because I had already gone through this kind of career switch and gotten to the point where I really felt strongly about my direction in life. And so it felt like someone had just put the brakes on what I was going to do in my life. And I remember speaking to an oncology therapist and saying, it's my first time kind of engaging in mental health and mental well-being, and saying, look, you know, I don't know how can I do this? I'm gonna feel uncomfortable going to class during chemotherapy. She's like, what do you mean go to class? You can't go to class, but you need to think about, you know, just focusing on living. Like, you should quit your job and move back home with your parents, and you should think about that. And I was like, absolutely not. I will not move home. I will not quit my MBA, and I'm not going to quit my job. And you know, everyone kind of faces things differently, but for me, that was a really transformative moment. And I thought, for some reason, that conversation gave me this will and this kind of determination to say, okay, just because everyone does it this way, that's not how it has to happen. So I decided in that moment that I was going to continue to live life in the way that I wanted, with modifications, but wanted to continue to do the things I thought were most important for me in my life. And so shortly after, of course, I changed a lot of things. But shortly thereafter, I've gone through, let's see, at this point in time, since March 2017, I've been a part of a clinical trial for a year and a half. I've been through 92 rounds of chemotherapy. I'm going to get my 93rd after this. I've gone through 19 rounds of radiation. I've had 1 recurrence, 4 surgeries. I've had 4 subcancers, which are cancers that are caused by the medication that I take. And you know, the truth of the matter is, I'm actually happier and more successful than I've ever been in my life. And there's something about having that level of adversity that has given me the ability to see things in a completely different light. So I'll share a couple more pictures. All right, so here I am. I went through the traditional chemotherapy that everyone goes through. I was really very self-conscious about that. Lost my eyelashes, lost my eyebrows, lost, of course, all of my hair. And this is I didn't think that it was going to be as, you know, defeating as it was, but that was me. This is me in one of my sessions of chemotherapy. I still receive chemotherapy via a port. So this has just become a part of my life. This is one of the secondary cancers that I had, where I had cancer on my face and had to have my entire face redone. But, and so I had 40 stitches in my face because of this secondary cancer that I had to endure. And I show you these things not to feel sorry for me, because these are, you know, obviously horrible things, but I just have a completely different outlook on life, and the way that I am able to kind of address everything from my choices in business to my relationships to what I think of my future. Now, one of the things that was most important to me, being a registered dietitian, being a nutritionist, being a healthcare professional, was I really wanted some level of control over what I did. And when I spoke to multiple oncologists, and this is a function of just medicine being somewhat siloed, I asked, you know, what can I do in my life? What can I do with regard to my nutrition, my fitness, my mindset? What are the levers I can pull to like have some level of control over my outcome? Because yes, you're giving me these statistics, but I'd like to think that I can do something and be a part of this remission equation. That's what I like to call it. Right? Because you hear people who do very well, and you hear all these wonderful anecdotes about maybe they started yoga, or they had some sort of mindset practice, or they ate something specific. But there's not a lot of data that is given to cancer patients upon diagnosis that allows them to really know what could work best for them. And my response was pretty consistent among the physicians I talked to was, well, we don't really know. We think it could be, you know, there could be some, maybe just eat healthy and don't forget to take walks. And I was like, okay, sounds good, I'll do that. But are there any specific strategies that I can engage with that might give me a leg up, just a little bit of a leg up against this really very ravishing disease that I was grappling with. The response was similar. It was, we don't know. No one's funding this type of research, or very little funding goes towards this research, because organizations that can determine that there's some sort of strategy, maybe turmeric has some sort of effect on overall proliferation of tumor cells, or maybe if someone does some sort of exercise, maybe that actually inhibits tumors to grow further. No one's doing that research, because if you determine that that is a great strategy, then it's not patentable, right? If I just determine that you take vitamin D and it's going to reduce your risk of metastasizing breast cancer, vitamin D is readily available, right? You can't just repatent that as a drug. So these types of studies are not funded, or they're not typically funded. And so it was really important for me at that time to get awareness around the additional parts of well-being that I thought played a key component to my survival, a key component to other people's survivals. And not just in my type of cancer, but all types of cancer, or all types of things in life. It's often a forgotten kind of part of a well-being strategy, or a healthcare strategy. So my best friend and I decided we would start a nonprofit called the Willow Foundation. And we started getting a lot of attention for this type of research. How could we kind of create funds? Can we generate funds to support research that connects lifestyle behaviors to improved outcomes for cancer patients? And so we are on our 5th year now. This, as you can see, this is 2017 now. We've been doing this for 5 years. We've funded 5 research projects. We're about to award our next project in January. And we fund organizations that look to the connection of lifestyle behaviors and improved outcomes in cancer patients. We funded a study that showed that regular exercise, cardiovascular exercise, can actually have an impact on overall reduction in tumors in late-stage cancer patients. We funded a study that showed that there's turmeric, like I said, has a anti-carcinogenic effect in petri dishes. So we're hoping to extrapolate that and bring it to a patient population. And most recently, we actually funded a study in coordination with an organization called Cura that showed that we could use AI and mindfulness training to help improve outcomes for late-stage cancer patients with comedy training and mindfulness exercise. And, do I think that these are the cure? No. Am I definitely into my drugs? Absolutely. I need those to survive, and I think that's why I'm alive today. But, I also think that the choices that I've made as a human being have helped me to beat the odds. I'm currently in total remission. I've been in remission. This is my 2nd time for about 1.5 years. We get to next summer, and then we start to reduce my medications, which is a great thing. So we're just kind of working on it all the time. But I think that my physicians are just kind of surprised. Hey, what happened? We were telling you you're going to die, and now we are uncertain of what to do, which is a weird place to be when you and your physician are deciding on strategies together. I'm like, hey, I didn't go to medical school. Like, I don't know how I went in here, but that's where we are, which is kind of a fun place, because we just are kind of ahead of the medicine. So I feel very strongly about various components of well-being, not just nutrition, of course, is nutritious, not just exercise, and that's clearly important, but also what are the things that we can do to play a role in our overall success when faced with adversity. And so in 2020, during the pandemic, I spent some time, I had been working for Marriott on global well-being strategy. So my career has actually progressed significantly since getting cancer. I don't think it's because I got cancer, but I do like to think that my level of adversity and grit helps me in my career as well. So since getting cancer, I was consulting for Marriott for 6 years. I was hired on as their director of global well-being. So I ran our global well-being strategy for about 550,000 employees across the globe. Once the pandemic hit and poor hospitality industry kind of toppled over, I joined McCormick, spices company that all of you have, and ran their global well-being strategy for 2 years. And then just recently this summer switched, and now I work for a large pharmaceutical manufacturer called Beatrice, probably the largest Fortune 200 company you've never heard of, but it's a new merger. And I run their global well-being strategy as well as global benefits. So my career has changed dramatically as an improvement since I was diagnosed. And interestingly, every time I've gone for an interview, someone has asked me, did you tell them about cancer when I've interviewed? Just such a strange thing to say. And I'm like, well, I mean, you Google my name and it is everywhere. And so I think that's like my strategy. But truthfully, I think that it's a value add right? Because now I have perspective, particularly working in well-being. I have the resilience that a lot of people are really facing post-pandemic, kind of grappling with this new world and mental health issues that we have, of course, across this nation, across the world specifically. I have insight that I think is really valuable to an organization. We have been able to leverage my cancer in a really positive way to do good for these organizations. So in 2020, back to when I was at Marriott and the pandemic hit, I decided to start writing a little bit about my story. Was feeling like writing was going to be another cathartic way for me to deal with all of the things happening in the world, and started to kind of tell my story a little bit. And when I started writing things down, I realized that I wanted it to feel a little bit more like a manual, some sort of kind of step-by-step instructions to deal with things related, not necessarily cancer, but related to adversity that could help folks get to a place where they felt a little bit more empowered to take ownership of their health. And so I started writing a little bit about my story and where I had gotten to and how cancer had affected my journey. But then I realized that there are others that have interesting stories that probably could be weaved into this as well. So I started talking to my network and realized that I had a pretty broad network of folks that had dealt with large levels of adversity also. I wrote a very good friend who had, at the age of 26, jumped off the dock in Ocean City, Maryland, after a day of fun and had broke his neck and is now in a wheelchair, and believes that that transformative event, while he will never walk again, it was probably one of the best things to ever happen to him. His heightened sense of awareness is, just more of an advocate for quadriplegics and tetraplegics, and has found a higher purpose in his life. I spoke to a friend of mine's mom who is a world-class triathlete and got hit by a distracted driver on her training run, and was given a 1 in 10 chance of surviving, and last week ran and won her age division, her most recent triathlon. I spoke with a friend of mine whose child was born with a significant loss of oxygen during birth. And he was also given only a couple of days to live, and now he just turned 4 last week. And I realized that these stories were, first of all, everywhere, right? And so that my experience with cancer, while unique to me, was not unique in terms of my response and reaction, but that we all have these similar experiences, these similar themes with our adversity, meaning that we had experienced something that is called post-traumatic growth. So everyone's heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, but there's something called post-traumatic growth, where folks that are given some adversity are able to take that and see very easily the silver lining of that, and are able to grow emotionally because of it. And I realized these themes across all of these stories, and thought that it'd be really fun to write a little bit about these stories and to talk about the different wellness principles that each of these people used to get themselves to a point where they felt more empowered to live this healthier, more fulfilling life. And those 6 principles are very traditional wellness. So we have nutrition, how important it is for us to focus on nutrition, to think of food as fuel. That's something that's really crucial to me, right? That food isn't just something that you're eating because, it's also fuel. It's also the thing that is helping to drive energy, and it also can mitigate disease, which I think is incredibly powerful, right? Like there's, a compound in broccoli that can actually reduce the size of tumor growth and development, which is unbelievable. And that fish oil or fish or salmon can actually thin your blood to the point where can reduce your blood pressure. Like, amazing that these things that exist in nature can have these powerful effects on our health. So everyone I spoke to really engaged in nutrition, in some sort of nutrition strategy that was thinking of food as fuel for them for life. The second one was, of course, exercise. So some sort of movement, ensuring that you daily prioritize some level of movement, not just because we know it's important for your health and your body, but also because of the impact it has on your mental health. And that was something that everyone found to be really important. The next was mindset. And I'm really happy that over the course of the last few years, the pandemic has done a lot of terrible things for us, but I think it has opened the conversation around mental health, and us being able to kind of share how we're all on the spectrum of mental health all of the time, from day to day, we swing back and forth. And so it's not just that people who have mental health issues are at one specific point in that scale, but that we're always kind of washing back and forth, and that focusing on that is really key to your overall well-being specifically. And that's one of my big key focuses in the corporate space, is to get organizations to really talk about this more broadly. So everyone that I spoke to was focusing on mindset, mindfulness training, and just, overall nourishment of mental health. The next one was authenticity. Another thing that I felt like, we've had a tough time. Everyone wants to do their absolute best, but being authentic and real was a very powerful thing, which is why, I will tell you that I never came into this building without a wig on when I first was ill. And this picture was a very difficult thing for me to start sharing to audiences. And I never thought of myself as a vain person, or that I thought I would lose my hair and I would rock, this baldness. And then I felt incredibly self-conscious. And so engaging with kind of the things, the insecurities with me, and sharing those with other people actually helped me to create more authentic relationships, have more authentic conversations, and really kind of it became one of the key things that helped me to grow as a human and also connect with others. And the last one is love. And that was one thing that I really talked through with some of the people that I interviewed, and how important it was to just, and it doesn't have to be love in a relationship, your primary relationship, it could be love and friendship, love and family, and whoever else, and how important that was, and the things that when you embrace and engage with loving relationships, how that can be truly transformative with regards to your overall resilience. So I spent time looking at those 6 things and how they would have an effect on a variety of different ailments, whether it's cancer, whether it's recovering from an injury, whether it's it could be just an emotional trauma. I interviewed a woman who had her brother, who was her best friend, had committed suicide out of the blue, and she's grappling with that 10 years later, and started a foundation supporting mental health, and how these things specifically had helped her kind of be lift up in her life, and feel more at peace with the what she had dealt with. So in the book, I describe these stories and use these key 6 principles, because I found it was, truly important for us to know that you have some level of control over your life, and that getting there specifically would have an impact on your outcome. So whether or not those 6 things have impacted my health, or whether or not my medicine is just more effective, I'm not totally sure. But I'm thrilled that, almost 6 years later, I'm fully without cancer, and I'm living this what I consider to be a very full life, and I'm feeling much stronger and more resilient afterwards. So it has been the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and the best thing that's ever happened to me. So any questions? Yeah. Instead of
do you guys have, is there any questions for Leah? Yes, we have.
Yeah,
sure. Thank you so much for coming. Very inspiring story. I guess I'm curious most about how your experiences these last 5 years have affected your interpersonal relationships, or rather your approach to both professional and relationships.
I'll start with personal relationships. It's when you deal with trauma, and this is not exclusive to someone who has a life-altering diagnosis like me. It could be any sort of trauma. What happens with your friends and your relationships is it's sometimes very surprising. You have people that show up, you have people that don't show up. You have a lot of people that want to be around you. I had a handful of folks that really, this is going to sound kind of odd, but really, and I do detail this in a story in one of my books, that took on my illness as their own and really felt strongly. And that was an uncomfortable experience for me. And I talk about this thing called the ring theory. Has anyone heard this before? I didn't publish this, but I talk about it in the book. It's basically where someone's dealing with a trauma experience in the center of the ring, and then there's a ring around the center, and that's your primary support system. For me at the time, it was my best friend. She's in the next ring, and then the next ring might be your parents or your family members or children, and the next ring might be other close friends. And the ring goes outwardly depending on how far away the people are to you in terms of closeness. And the ring theory says that people can dump their feelings outwardly, but not inwardly, right? Like I can dump out to everyone about my cancer. I can tell everyone how awful it is. But my parents can't come to me and be like, your cancer is really awful. It's really dangerous. But this happens surprisingly a lot. You have folks that really take on, you know, your illness or your trauma and like will dump back inward. And so I thought that that was a really helpful way to describe how you communicate with people. And I shared that pretty broadly because I did have a very close friend who was like, this is tough for me too. And I was like, oh, really? So that was like, you know, like it was kind of an interesting experience. So friendships and relationships were, you know, I will say a lot of them were strengthened, right? Because you can get through trauma together. Professional was really interesting. I've had several different supervisors that have not known what to say to me. And I went through radiation while I was working full time and going into the office 5 days a week. And so I remember going to my supervisor and saying, hey, I have to go in for radiation. I'm getting it at 7:30 in the morning at the hospital and I'm driving to work afterwards. I'm like, I'm so sorry that this is what I'll be there. And he was like, oh, okay, whatever you need. And kind of did this hand thing, like, I heard, good, do what you need. And I remember being like, great, like, I'm glad I had the flex time to like come in late, but also felt really uncomfortable with ever talking to him ever again about any sort of issues that I had. And then I had supervisors that have been interested in understanding and knowing and not asking me, hey, what was your last surgery like? And, you know, but just like, tell me a little bit more about this and how this affects your life. I think a lot of people with a disease like mine, they're so uncomfortable with asking questions. And the truth of the matter is, most of us want to talk about it. I would say that most of us that are dealing with trauma will at least like to say a little bit. I think everyone just assumes, oh, well, we won't bring it up because it's like a tough topic. I'm like, yeah, it's a tough topic, but I want to know that you're interested and care about it. I will also say that I've blended a lot of my personal life and my professional life at this point, not only because I work in well-being, and so it does blend just in general, but also because what I've experienced from I don't want to say a disability perspective, but from an inclusion perspective, from just, you know, just having experience as an employee, and since my function falls under HR, I think is a really valuable insight that employers have started to realize it's a value add to their organization. And so talking about it, so now I'm like, I have like a viral post on LinkedIn. I have a book, I have a website. If you're going to hire me, you know what's happened to me, and I don't have to have that conversation. But it's a little bit, it's awkward, and I'm kind of here to say it's not awkward. We should all talk about it. And it's kind of surprising. Cancer, I'm sure all of you know someone in your life that has been affected by cancer. It is everywhere and it's only on the rise. And so if we're able to talk about it a little bit more openly, I think it's probably better for everyone. So I have a fair amount of accommodations. I work from home despite the fact that my company is based in Pittsburgh. I spend every third Wednesday, I spend about 4 hours in the hospital. I bring my laptop and I work. I did a conference call while in the hospital, and my colleagues were like, everything okay? And I like turn camera on, they see like the thing coming into my chest, and they're like, oh, let's be authentic here. This is what life is like. You know, and so that's just been, I think it's been eye-opening for the people I work with. And I don't think it's changed my ability to do my work whatsoever. I think we're working in a more connected world, and we're able to have these kind of flex hours, right? And so this is just kind of falls into that. So the change in the style in which we've been working has been very advantageous for someone like me. That was a long answer. I can't say that a lot of extra things.
We have a comment on online that I wanted to share. Sure. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I don't have a question, but a comment to say that I'm incredibly inspired by your approach toward difficult situations. I'm the mother of a 13-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old special needs son. I'm trying to model empathy and teach my daughter the importance of not giving up when life hands you a curveball. I will be sharing your story with her, and am so grateful for role models such as yourself.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Another question.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Erin. Thank you so much for sharing today. In a situation like this, I think what comes to mind is like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so expensive. And then having gone through something not totally similar to you, but like a medical scare, feeling like guilty almost to like want to get the care because I'm like, it's going to be so expensive. How can I pay for it? Can my parents pay for it, etc.? So I'm wondering like like if you encountered that, how did you remember to like prioritize yourself? Like, were there any kind of guiding things that helped you overcome this like kind of artificial barrier of money?
Meaning like engaging with like a nutritionist or exercise, something that's like not covered by insurance, is that what you mean, or?
Yes, and also like when you're in the situation and you have to get the surgeries, like
Yeah.
I'm not sure how big your
Yeah.
experience was, but if you're like, wow, thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
that is like, how did that impact your mindset to like have the resilience to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, right? Like I hit my catastrophic cap in the first week of January every year, right? So every year in January, I spend thousands of dollars and I budget for that, and that is what it is. It's hard, is it fair? Obviously not. Do we probably need a change in our healthcare system? Yes. I'm sitting in a meeting yesterday, of course, because I work in employee health and benefits, and I'm sitting in this meeting with our healthcare vendor, and they're talking about all these like large claimants that are claiming like millions of dollars for cancer. And I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna bring my name up. This awkward situation, which they didn't, thank God. I'm not one. I do spend a lot of money in healthcare, but not as much as some others. But I realize that I have a level of, I've been fortunate. For some strange reason, my career has gone upwards since I've been diagnosed. And so I'm able to budget for that very specifically. But I will say one of the things that happened to me is when I was diagnosed, I was, working full-time, but paying my way through graduate school. And, it's not cheap to be here, as you all know. And there was a moment in time I was like, how do I spend money on this tuition? Like, how can I do this when I don't even know if I'm going to live long enough for this to like actually do anything for me? And luckily, fortunately, it did work out. But and I credit also my time here for like the jump start in my career as well, not just cancer. But it is a very difficult obstacle to overcome. And I've been doing a little bit of work for this patient advocacy group, and that's one of the things that I share is that I realize that I'm fortunate in that I am able to work for a company that allows me to work remotely, work for a company that allows me to take 4 hours off in the middle of the day every third Wednesday to go, that a frontline worker wouldn't have that same experience, that if they had to like be on site, they wouldn't have that same experience. It's a totally different, my experience is a different experience as someone who has less privilege, and I totally realize that. And also the wherewithal to continue to go to business school and to finish and to have connections at large organizations. Like I realize that I'm coming from a level of privilege. Money is a difficult topic. I do think from a healthcare perspective, you can't just ask people to spend thousands of dollars because they happen to receive a diagnosis that they knew nothing about. My cancer there's no genetic testing for mine. I have no family history of cancer. I don't have the BRCA gene. I did all the genetic testing. I don't have one person in my extended family that had cancer. My grandmothers lived until they were well into their 90s. Like there was no indication that I was going to get this disease. And so, unfortunately, we talk a lot about lifestyle behaviors and how that affects our healthcare system, but there's a lot of situations like mine that are just happenstance and they're penalized, unfortunately. So I don't have a good answer for you, but hopefully there's change coming. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you again for the stories are powerful. And one question I have for you is, obviously you went through like a pretty fundamental shift in your life. I'm just really curious how in working with employee welfare, how did that change? And how have you brought that experience to the table and and all the corporations that we consult for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that so if anyone, I don't know if anyone here has ever worked in employee health or well-being or has any experience with it, but of the last decade or so, employers are taking more of a role in their employees' health. And what that means is they're also imposing various rules, regulations, requirements, etc., to have like reduced healthcare costs, and that's a part of strategy. So an example would be if you collect this number of steps, if you participate in less exercise, if you do this wellness coaching, you get this number of points and your healthcare is reduced. And so employers are taking this kind of increased role. And so there's been a lot of punitive involvement for, hey, if you go get a biometric screening and your BMI is 31, and then you have to go do coaching because of this, and that's And then, then unfortunately, like you don't get the points and then your healthcare is more expensive. That used to be part of the strategy that I was working with organizations on, like, hey, let's reduce healthcare costs and let's like make these strategies and enforce these rules. Since my diagnosis, I think I'm surprised, despite the fact that I use nutrition as a strategy and exercise is really important to me and wellness principles in general, I'm so much more, I think, just understanding of like everyone's personal needs, right? Like not everyone's going to go run a marathon and not everyone can eat vegan and not everyone can do mindfulness meditation every single day. I'm much more into the strategy of treating our employees like consumers and having them pick the benefits that make the most sense to them. So for them, that's going to be engaging with a free exercise program, great. If instead it's going to be using care.com and having like some extra days to themselves because they have like they have backup care for their children, that's great. And so I broadened my view of what wellness is. Wellness used to be very narrow and it was preventive health. And now it's look, all of these things kind of impact one another. Whether or not you have help with your children, that impacts whether or not you can get to sleep, and whether if you sleep, that impacts your mood the next day. And if you're feeling bad, and your work's going to be affected. So it's, I think that has played a huge role in my just acceptance of personalization around the concept of wellness. So.
I have a question about,
Yeah.
While you were here and you were sort of going through it's hard enough to be in an MBA program. Like, how did the community here?
Yeah.
Live or
That's
not
an
live?
easy question. If my friends are listening, I'll talk to them.
Yeah.
So yes,
We
Yeah.
actually representatives and,
yeah,
what could we do to,
sure.
increase and improve?
Yeah, I will say that I did not feel like I would ever have found a community like I did at McDonough. It has been a transformative experience for me just from that perspective alone. I felt like I had a strong network of friends from undergrad. I went to grad school before. I was in the Army. I had a strong network at work. I thought I would come here, do my classes and leave. But when I got sick, and I didn't even really know my people all that well, because I was slightly disengaged, I would say, in my first year. I wasn't into any clubs. I wasn't doing anything really engaging because I was I was working really hard. I was still, I had my Army stuff. And so there was just too many things for me to feel really engaged. But once I got sick and I sent an email out to the people that I knew in my group, I could not believe the amount of support that I received, probably more so in this organization than anywhere else, truly. And I mean, some of my very best friends are from from here, absolutely. And I could not believe and understand how supportive they were, just in listening and understanding. We'll also say that they were the most inquisitive of all of my friends, more open to understanding what I was going to, ask the right questions, ask deep questions, right? Like, how is this feeling and what is this doing for you? And I think cancer is just such an awkward topic for so many people, and I don't know why that is, because it's just a part of life and we're all going to experience it, whether ourselves or someone else. I think it's 1 in 3 women will experience cancer, and 1 in 2 men. I mean, it's going to hit someone in your life, or which is obviously difficult to talk about, but my folks here at McDonough were the most inquisitive and the most interested in learning what I was going through. And of course they saw it, right? They saw me come in one day with a wig on. They saw me come in one day with short hair. They saw me come in, leave in the middle of the class because I was sick, had to throw up in the middle of class. Like, they saw these things. I was going through actual chemotherapy while having class, and their support has been one of the best networks for me specifically. And I think that's partially because you get a sense of community here, of course, because you're all in the thick of it together and you're all experiencing the adversity of class and difficulty and projects, etc. And so there was just a sense of kind of sticking together that I have continued to experience well beyond my graduation. It's a selling point. I wanted to. I had to, yeah.
I want to continue to cultivate that.
Yeah, I think that naturally occurs here. I dealt with some trauma, but there are a lot of folks here that in my group that dealt with some level of trauma. And I did have a classmate whose wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 1 or 2. So pretty routine. She had like a routine experience. but immediately he connected with me. I talked to her, we went to lunch, and we have stayed friends since then, you know, and I hope that's the case. I feel like one of the things that cancer patients like me like to relish in is sharing their experience with other people, if it's helpful at all, because you go into this thinking like, first of all, no one ever thinks it's going to happen to them, and you go into it thinking, knowing absolutely nothing. I mean, I knew absolutely nothing about cancer at all, and so like just having a little bit of inside information is truly helpful. So, good question. Yes.
Thank you again, Leah, for being
Yes.
here and sharing your story. And just to add to the introduction that Carrie made, you were also the recipient of the Daniel Walker McNeil Award, which is given to the student
Yes.
who best represents our values. So
Thank you.
congratulations on that. But I do have a question. I'm curious to understand if you have reflected on any formative experiences. You know, so you've shared a cross-section of stories of other people who have gone through a similar experience, and you noticed lots of similar and common themes, and you have captured many of those in the book. But I'm more curious about, you know, almost like a time series analysis. Let's roll the clock back. When you were 5 years old, 6 years old, when was the first traumatic, difficult experience you had, and can we draw a line from those 30 years to what's going on now?
Yeah. Did you read my book? I'm like, oh, I did. No, I will say that I was not a very resilient child. I was one of those like hypersensitive children that would cry at kind of the drop of a hat. Like I got teased a lot as a kid because I was crying at like, you know, all the mean girls. Like I was the one that was just like really took everything to heart. Now I say that that's just, I'm an empathetic person, and maybe that's what it is. But truly, I was not a very what I would consider to be resilient child. But when I was 18-ish, I was very competitive in tennis and softball. I was trying to play one of those in college, and I was playing tennis. I guess it was my senior year. I was trying to play. I had a serve, and I felt a pain in my neck, and it was just like absolutely devastating. I had to quit the match. This went on intermittently for over 2 years. I went to, I don't even know, I mean, 10, 15 different physicians, and everyone was like, there's nothing wrong with you, go to physical therapy, maybe you should do this, maybe you should, you know, try. I remember going to like an eye doctor and him saying I needed reading glasses because I was strained, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And then in college, it was so bad that I would wake up in the middle of the night in agonizing pain. And I was failing my class. Actually, my freshman year of college, I failed 2 classes and had a D in another class. I almost just got rid of the entire, just could not do anything. Eventually found a physician at Johns Hopkins that my mom called and said, please, can you help my daughter? I think she might have this. She had Googled, and she's like, I think that she might have this disease. No one's looking for it, blah, blah. And so he took, usually you have to have a referral to see him. He took a pity on our family, took me in and was like, looks at my MRI. And I was like, yeah, you have Arnold Chiari malformation, which is a brain malformation. And he's like, but I also think you might have something else. And did one test, a bone scan, and found that I had a giant tumor on my spine. So I had this like 19 years old. I just finished my freshman year, just barely finished my freshman year of college because I failed a lot of classes. And found out that I had a tumor on my spine that had to be resected. I had to be in a neck brace for 3 months in the summer of between my freshman and sophomore year of college. Had to delay playing sports. I ended up playing my junior and senior year, played softball in college. But yeah, I think that was, as awful as that was my first indication that I had the grit to kind of get through a situation where both I had to buck the comments or the thoughts of other people. I think we always think that of physicians as our authority, but for me, it was like, okay, well, not everyone's correct. And perhaps, perhaps there's more to this. I learned more about being my own advocate, that this pain wasn't going away, that something was wrong with me. And that was the first indication that I had that I would be able to see silver lining beyond like whatever adversity hit me. And I don't know why that is, but I am the type of person where if something bad happens, I am always able to eventually, not right away, but eventually find what the silver lining is and what this could do for me in the future, or what this could do for me for my insight, for my perspective, for my sharing, or for whatever else. I'm always able to do that. It might not be right away. It might be 3 days later, 5 days later, 2 months later, but I will find it. So for example, this picture here, when I had the secondary cancer on my nose, I had already gone through virtually everything. I had tons of surgeries. I had gone through chemo. I had done everything, and then I go to my physician, she's like, we're gonna have to do surgery on your face, it's gonna be 40 stitches on your face, we're gonna have to like totally redo. You probably can't tell, but like my nose is different than in that picture because they had to totally redo my face. And I remember thinking to myself, this is not a life-threatening illness. This is just, you know, like a surgery. And I just collapsed on the floor. I could not, after all this, I could not handle that. And I spent like a couple of days just like in deep sadness of like, how is this happening to me? How is this additional thing happening? Why is this still happening to me? And then eventually I realized that, okay, well, the best part about this is the way they redo my face, they get to pull my skin down from my forehead over my nose. And so I'll never have wrinkles again. And not 40s, but I'm not gonna have wrinkles. And so like, okay, well, this is I don't have to, you know, I don't have to do that. So this is the way that's a deal with trauma in my life, is like get to a point where I'm finding something that's going to be helpful or valuable, even if it's just insight and perspective for the future. So
I also wanted to, so Leah, I had mentioned that part of one of the many reasons I wanted to have you here was to make a contribution to a collection that I'm going to ask this group to come up and talk about for a second. In fact, why don't you, Sam and others, so.
I think at the very best, what this collection is, it's called the Inspiration Collecting, and it showcases stories and starts conversations like yours. So Leah, we couldn't be any more proud to have your book in this collection, and to be able to bring this community together around ideas like this that are so inspiring. Basically, what it is the alumni, and you fall into that category, and current students, staff, faculty, and several in this room make recommendations about books that have had an impact on them and inspired them. And then they go on the shelf with an inscription in it. So we can have conversations about that. You mentioned, or at least in my mind, the idea of what it means to do good and in healthcare. And that's the point here, is to figure out what it means to do good and start those conversations about that to inspire people. So we're really, really happy to donate or to contribute this collection and all the processes behind it to Operation Cure Personalis, so that it can be something that continues to happen here at MSB. And again, couldn't be more proud to have your book.
Thank you. Thank you.
So as part of that, so as Sam and Gregor and their group, they have done a tremendous job of really pulling this together. I'm thrilled with it. I'm so happy to include it in Operation Cure Personalis. It is a perfect, it's just a perfect piece of what we're trying to do. This is in fact Leah's book that she wrote. I didn't even know that you had written the book. I think I told you, and I somehow was on Amazon and was like, I don't Leah, what? And so I got her book. And so when you guys announced this, I knew immediately that this was the book I was going to put. And so I want to read you just a little bit of what I said. So all of these books, which is so great, spend some time going through them, has a little inscription, who put the contributor is me. So Leah Evert is a true inspiration and reminder of the power of holistic wellness combined with grit and resilience. She is a wellness expert, stage 4 cancer survivor, speaker, author, veteran, and McDonough MBA alumnus. So then I talk about a few things that you've already said. And I said, Leah personifies the type of student alum that we want at McDonough. She is kind, positive, resilient, and committed to service, a true Hoya. I'm grateful to Leah for reminding me of what really matters in life. So thank you. I'm thrilled to include this in the collection, and I hope you guys will check it out and read it, and it will live right there. So thank you so much for being part of this. Any closing thoughts or last comments? I want to thank our online audience and all of you alumni and friends that already know Leah.
Yeah, no, thank you for, I think this is the coolest thing. And if the pandemic has done nothing else, I think it's opened our eyes to the need for this concept of whole person well-being and really just being kind and thoughtful to one another and finding the things that that make us who we are. So thank you for this. I think that's a really imperative part. The other thing, I will say one other thing. When I started here at McDonough, I remember feeling self-conscious because I worked in wellness and I was a nutritionist, and everybody else, I had all my friends who were finance and marketing professionals, and I felt like, okay, well, how this isn't, I don't feel like my experience, you know, I'm coming here with absolutely no, I had never taken a business class in my life. I'd taken only science classes. And I thought, okay, I don't know if this is going to translate. I don't know if I'm going to do well here. There's a lot of self-doubt in that. But I'm loving, and I realized also too, how important and imperative it is to include well-being in all of our strategies of business. And I've seen that grow over the course of my career for sure. And I get solicitations for companies all of the time for my thoughts, input, and then just to come and help them bring concepts of wellness to work. So it to me, a really, really important turn on how we think about our people. So.
And I want to actually, Peter, thank you for bringing this, because it is because of, you know, your guys' work, the faculty, Peter Swarovski, that allows the students to actually build and explore and make a difference. So thank you. So, yeah. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.